Now, in our part of the world, with building permits and codes and inspections, a house is not finished until it's passed a final inspection. And that's what Phil has come to our house to take care of today. Now, for most of us, thankfully, the only times that we really come into direct contact with codes and laws and inspections are the times that are related to traffic laws or tax forms.
And then if it's this style, that should send
The rules that govern construction do many things to our industry and for our industry. But primarily, in my opinion, they make our structures safer, stronger, longer lasting, and much, much, much more expensive.
I will double check that exact language and get you the video.
Great.
Make sure that that's exactly right.
Now, Phil is a non-typical building official, in my opinion, for several reasons. Number one, he's got an engineering degree, and he worked as an engineer for a good period of time. Second, he owned and successfully operated his own construction company. And now, he's the head building inspector in our county. He's a very knowledgeable, very fair, and very tough guy. And I hope we can all agree that those are three characteristics that are important to having a good inspector. If you stick around to the end of this video, you're going to hear me, and see me, actually, interview Phil about his journey through construction and what it is that brought him to inspection at this point in his life. I recommend that you give it a listen. So Phil, you are a fairly recent addition to the Douglas County Building Department regime, right? You've been here like 5 or 6 years, something like that?
Yeah, I think that's about right.
Okay. So talk to us a little bit about where you came from, and then a little bit about why you chose Douglas County and building inspection, because you came from private sector, right?
Correct. Well, I'll try and make it as quick and sweet as possible. My career path is probably not very conventional to most people's career choices. When I choose what I want to do with my life, it centers around my family a lot. And so to start off with, I originally went to school and got a degree in civil engineering because I really enjoyed the construction industry and wanted to do something that was related to that industry. However, as I was getting my degree, I realized I didn't necessarily want to be a structural engineer sitting in an office doing design work. I was more interested in the actual process versus just the design work. So after I graduated, I went and practiced engineering for a couple of years, but then quickly was fortunate enough to fall into a scenario where I was able to start my own construction company, and did that for about a little over 10 years. And that was a period of time when I reevaluated how things were going with my career, and I had younger kids. Time flies when you're raising kids. So.
Boy.
But I evaluated what I was doing with my time, and also what was happening with the economy at the time, and decided I wanted to find something that was a little bit more structured, and wasn't necessarily even thinking about the building department or building codes as a career opportunity, but came across a meeting with the former building official, and heard something that he said, and it struck an accord with my thought process. And so I looked into whether or not my skill set would be something that would translate over. And I had to go through some additional training, kind of on my own and take some testing through the ICC, which the state of Oregon takes that certification and molds it into an Oregon certification for building inspection. And through that process, was able to get employed with the building department, and the rest is history.
So I remember when that transition happened, because I was a friend of that former building official. And he was excited that he'd made contact with you. And I think there for a little bit he thought that had faded out, or that opportunity had passed for the building department. And then I was talking to him again, and he said that you were still coming or something. And I remember that he was pleased. And I can tell you that as a contractor here, I and a lot of other guys like me were pretty pleased when you showed up, because of your footprint in the private sector before. It made you a better inspector by far, I think. So talk just for a minute about the transition from private to public. And I know that this conversation can be sensitive, but it can't be easy going from private to public service.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have asked me over the years, how do you like it? And is probably the biggest question I get, and I still get that question. Some people are surprised that I've been here as long as I have already. I think that
they thought you wouldn't have lasted.
Or they don't realize how much time has evaporated already. They're just like, wow, it's already been that long. So for me, I did work in the public sector briefly, and so I had a little experience of what public sector work was like. One of the things I really like about the building department is it's public sector. However, it's as close to private sector as public sector can be. So
here, now, this job.
I'm pretty sure that most building departments are this way. So the building department is budgeted and has to be ran by the permit fees. So you don't have a tax base that you're working off of. So it's kind of like a business. So that part of the building department is intriguing to me. How there's efficiencies that have to be met, and you're also providing a service. However, you're also regulatory. So there's a balance between, doing what you have to do and inspecting to code, but also trying to work with the quote unquote customer to make sure that things are done in an efficient manner. Wow. So that part of transitioning from private to public was intriguing to me, because when I owned my own business, those are all challenges that you deal with when you have your own business. Also, you have to provide a service, but you also have to be efficient at what you do. And
you have to enforce the terms of the contract you signed with those people, but yet the customer has to end up still being willing to speak well of you, hopefully, for a long time in the future.
So I think probably, again, like I said, one of the reasons I chose to come to the building department was my family, and I think the biggest plus to working in the public sector is the defined work day. There's not many nights I'm up late working on stuff, whereas in the private sector you have to get the bids out, you have to meet with prospective clients or current clients kind of sometimes all hours of the day or weekends or whatever.
You got to design, you got to draw, you got to market, you got to bill, you got to collect, and oh, by the way, you got to build.
So
it's hard.
That's definitely one of the benefits of being in the public sector. One of the drawbacks is no matter how hard I work or whatever I do, I can never increase my profit and get a bonus per se. It's just my wage is my wage, and only personal satisfaction is what you're using to motivate yourself.
So just to kind of wrap up, but I think we probably would like to get you on the podcast with Nate sometime. He asks way better questions than I do ordinarily. So what percentage of the code that you enforce is life safety? How much of it is structural longevity to compensate for people who don't know what they're doing when they show up to build something? How much of it would you say, this is a very arbitrary and subjective question, but let's just leave it at life safety. How much of what you do, and a lot of what you did here today inspecting this on the final, was real life safety issues? I mean, smoke alarms and carbon monoxide integrity and fall protection, railings. How much of the code that you are enforcing is life safety? Well, I would say that it all is. At least it should be. But in that answer, of course, is some subjectiveness, because some people would say that certain things in the code aren't that important.
Right.
And others would say, well, if the house isn't healthy, as far as if the air that's in the house is stagnant or whatever, that's not that big of a deal. But others would say, no, that's a true health / life safety issue if you have a house that's unhealthy.
Right.
So I think that exact line between, you know, we say it's fire life safety. There's a huge component of the building code that is fire issue. You know, we want not necessarily for the house to be saved, but the occupants to be safe and get a chance to escape if a fire occurs. I think the most logical place for that people understand well is the fire separation between the garage and the rest of the house. I mean, that's
right. And I have a repair to do on that. There's some caulking I got to put in.
Yeah. That's a pretty logical. People understand that, you know, there's vehicles, or a lot of people store a little gas can with their mower or whatever. There's a higher hazardous area inside a residential garage than the rest of the house, and we want to build a little time into the structure so if it does catch on fire, people can get out.
Yeah.
I think the fire folks would tell us, and I'm just throwing a number out because I don't know it, but a larger majority of the fires start in the garages and homes. And then the next biggest fire issue is, you know, when people don't have working smoke alarms, and that's where we see casualties, and we're trying to avoid that, of course.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
But kind of back to your question, and to answer it completely, you know, again, the 3 tenets, the fire life safety, and that's really what the building code is established for. And then the last bit of that would be just to create a standard for people. So people know, hey, it was inspected to this standard. So I expect my handrails to be within a range when I go in a house that was built to code. I expect, you know, there not to be 14 steps that are all different height and stuff like that. So.
And banks expect that, and insurance companies expect that.
Correct.
And it's sort of the baseline of what sort of supports our housing economy now.
Correct. It's part of having a structured civilization.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, for better or for worse.
There's pluses and minuses.
There's pluses and minuses.
Yeah.
But thank you. You've been straight up fair with us here. And in fact, you've gone out of your way more than once to kind of keep the customer moving along, and it's deeply appreciated. Thank you, Phil. So this is a great day, and I think that I'm going to have to forge a Phil award or something, because we've had 3 Phils on this job that have been critically important to the success of the project, or at least to the survivability for me. Phil Rokas, whom you've met, Phil whom you watched put all the tile work in, and Phil, who is the building inspecting supervisor here in Douglas County. I like him. He's a good guy. He walked through our project. He gave me a couple little items, a little fire caulking in the garage, in a firewall ceiling. There's a firewall consideration, right, in a garage. And then that upstairs bonus room window has to have a limiting function, so it can't be opened wide enough for your 2-year-old to fall out. And that's it. We're done. We're signed off, and it is time to begin to think about this project as being something that we did in the past instead of something that is putting pressure on us in the moment. I'm delighted. We are delighted. It has been a pleasure, and it's a pleasure to move on to other things. Thanks for watching Essential Craftsman, and keep up the good work.